On this episode of the Bangkok podcast, Evo interviews an expert on medical tourism to get the inside scoop on a growing industry.
And an anecdote to prove that even the second largest city in Southeast Asia is really just a small town on the crossroads of life.
Here's episode 2.32 of the Bangkok podcast, right in your ears. Hello and welcome to the Bangkok podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian expat who came to Thailand on a vacation in 2001 and never left.
And I am Evo Terra, an American expat living full-time in Bangkok since the beginning of 2016. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the Big Mango.
So, Evo, it is Sunday night. I've got a bottle of beer Lao with me, sitting in front of my computer talking to you.
Ugh.
How was your weekend?
Well, better than drinking a beer Lao, that's for sure.
What?
Yeah. No, that's not true. Out of all the beers you can buy here in town, the beer Lao is not a bad one. I've had an interesting week. It's been Expats Visit Bangkok week for me previously. A couple of guys who I know, one is from Naples, Florida, the other from the D.C. area, who used to live in Bangkok when they were kids. This was home to them, but their parents were in the diplomatic corps and went away and have lived for 30 years abroad or back in America. And every year they come and do a reunion tour back in Bangkok, and got to hang out with those guys for earlier in the week. That was a blast.
Wow, that's interesting. I've always wondered what it would be like to grow up here as a youth and then take that experience out into the world somewhere.
It's really fascinating because the two brothers, they're roughly the same age, but my friend Bob hasn't retained any of his Thai. He's the one that lives in Naples, Florida. But his brother Don, who lives in D.C., who is an executive chef, sees Thai people on a regular basis, so he has retained his Thai knowledge. And it's just fascinating to watch the Thais react to somebody they don't expect to be speaking Thai. It's just fascinating to me when everybody else is kind of fumbling around, and then Don comes into the rescue with rattling off his Thai again. It's just quite quaint.
This probably speaks better Thai than me, too. He's been gone for however long, how many decades he's been gone. He probably speaks better than me.
Awfully fluent. But again, grew up here, not just showed up here for a while.
What did they say about the city changing? Did they say anything about how it's different from when they used to be here?
Well, they come every year, and they have, at least for the last 6 years. So for them, it's not quite as noticeable. There was a big change when they first showed up like 6 years ago because it had been 20, 30 years. There was no BTS line going down Sukhumvit when they grew up here. So they say Sukhumvit is very dark because there's a big shadow over the top of it. It makes sense. But it was fun for those guys to be in town. And I had one more. I had one more situation where a guy had read a blog post that I had written on how to get a Chinese visa when you come to Bangkok, and has encountered some challenges because, surprise, the rules have changed since that time. So he was writing some commentary and said, hey, I happen to be in town. Oh, and by the way, he says, we have mutual friends. He met me at a party in Atlanta in 2009. He was at a room party that I threw in Atlanta, Georgia in 2009. And just was looking for information about getting a visa in Bangkok and said, I know the guy that wrote that article. So we had drinks with him yesterday. So yeah, small, strange world we live here in this city of 12 million people where I meet people from around the world.
I do love that about Bangkok. Just the weird characters and chance meetings and like, oh, you know that guy too? Kind of thing. It happens all the time, and it's so fascinating. It really is a crossroads kind of city.
Yeah, it certainly is. But that's not what we're here to talk about today, is it?
It is not.
No, today, actually recently, a fine listener, just like yourself out there, suggested we talk about medical tourism because Bangkok is a hotbed for medical tourism. The problem is neither of us happen to be experts in the field other than having used the system, but certainly not as tourists. So I recently hopped on my trusty new motorbike, 5 days in, by the way, not dead yet. Good
Sweet
news. And I interviewed a guy named Kevin McGaffey from a company called Renewal. We met at a very Thai lunch place way up by Chatuchak Market, north of town. And in the background, you're going to hear the sounds of the piped-in music at the restaurant because neither of us could speak enough time well enough to say, yeah, could you please turn the music down just for 20 minutes? They couldn't quite get there, but we did it anyhow.
That's really cool. A rare in-the-wild interview for the Bangkok podcast. Just like the good old days. Well, here we go. Let's throw over to your interview and see what he has to say.
medical tourism. I don't know much about medical tourism other than when my wife goes to see her doctors in Bumlungat Hospital, it's like taking a mini tour of the Middle East. Yep. I don't need to travel there because they have all come to Bangkok.
Yep.
So I know we're a medical tourist destination.
Yep.
Why is that?
That's interesting. I'm not sure I can answer the entire question, but I know where you're getting at. I went to tour Dubai, and when I was there, the distinction that was interesting between Thailand and Dubai, because they have a healthcare city there, is in Thailand, all the doctors were Thai. The people running the hospitals were Thai. The entire thing was Thai. The medical community is Thai. When you went to Dubai, everybody was from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. So part of the reason it's so big here is there's a massive Thai community that wants to be here, stays here, goes abroad, learns, comes back and trains generations of Thai people and builds schools to keep training them. That's what feeds the system that people don't see.
Interesting. So it's where the other places are much more international in their personnel. This is all Thai. From several generations who've been going in the Thai. But why does that attract so many people from abroad to come and have medical work done in Thailand?
People like to come here anyway. And if you look at the top arrival groups, it's, Chinese, Russians, Middle Eastern, GCC countries are in there, et cetera, et cetera. And they're already coming, and they've discovered there's this great medical community here. And at some point in the first generation of hospitals, which started with Bumrungrad, but also Bangkok Hospital and Simidiwad Sukhumvit, they popped up and started marketing and signing contracts with people there, explaining this and doing marketing in these countries. And it just there's kind of an autogenesis now, because there's not the same level of service there, and it's expensive, actually, in those countries.
So the reason we have medical tourism as a big draw in Bangkok is because marketers made it happen, is really what you're saying. They went out and built the clientele list and said, hey, it's expensive there, it's not as much here. And we've got great doctors, right? I think that's part of the world-class doctors, and you should just come to Thailand because you want to come here anyhow.
Yeah, I think it. I'd have to go back and talk to some of the people that were around then, who I do sometimes. I think that's basically correct. There were already people coming, and there was already that medical community. I think they kind of dropped a match on it.
That's interesting. How long have you been in the medical tourism business here in Bangkok?
I got started around 2009, and we founded Renewal around 2013.
And not to make this a pitch, but what's Renewal do?
Medical tourism is basically what we do. I call ourselves a medical assistance company. It's somewhere in between. But roughly, people ask us for help with medical care, and then we do our best to assist with that.
Oh, so whatever. You're kind of a broker in between things. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, it's a fair thing to say. What they call it in the industry is an agent. Sure. But one of the things I noticed, and one of the reasons I founded the company, was I noticed a lot of people were just being brokers. They weren't providing a lot of added value. They weren't really investing in the client experience and technology and things like that. So one of the things I wanted to do was, hey, let's build technology and let's build processes and marketing and service models to help all of these people understand everything about this and support them.
We know that medical tourism is popular. We're speculating as to why it's happened, but it certainly has happened. Is there other competition in Southeast Asia, or does Thailand own it now?
Depends on where you're coming from. In terms of the broad world community, I would say not really, but it's fair to say that Malaysia has a couple of hospitals that are known, and Singapore is actually, it's an alternative for people that want to pay a lot and go to certain specific places, and then the Philippines has medical competence as well. Vietnam has some hospitals that are good at cancer, but the difference is, try as they might, those places are not attracting a ton of people, because if you're really wealthy, you might fly to MD Anderson in Houston anyway.
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, if you go for that super high-end niche. You and I are both from the southern edge of the American
Right.
states, as we would say. So a lot of people in America, especially where we lived, in Texas and Oklahoma and Arizona, will make the trip down across the border to get dental work done,
Right.
or some other, in the 70s, it was the, how should we say, less well-established treatments.
Yeah.
Is that kind of thing happening here? Do we see people from maybe Laos and Cambodia and Myanmar coming in here as well? Just regular people coming to get medical work here because it's better or cheaper than in their home countries?
It gets into a subjective thing there about better, but I would say overall, it's not hard to say that Thailand is better, for example, than the medical community in Cambodia. We have a service team in Cambodia, and we have Cambodian clients, and we assist them, and they're coming here because they don't trust the doctors there, because historically the hospitals are, some of them, sometimes they have good outcomes, sometimes they don't, and they're just getting their first major hospitals built by Bangkok Hospital Group here. So for them, this is the option. And at the same time, someone coming from Australia would see this as a budget option for an elective treatment for the most part, which means dental, plastic surgery, and things like that. So our Cambodian clients have hepatitis disorders, cancer, things like this. Our Australian clients are looking for facelifts and knee replacements, things like this.
Well, let's talk about the quality of care, because I think a lot of the folks that listen to this show who don't live here, who are thinking about relocating, are so yeah, great, we can get dental work, we can get plastic surgery and those sorts of things, but what about asthma doctors? What about just normal, I need an endocrinologist, or I just need a GP, or I don't feel well? Am I going to get the level of care a Westerner is used to?
Yeah, okay. Yes, you are. But the asterisk on that is depends on where you go and the decision you make. So, and who you see. A lot of the doctors we work with, you mentioned endocrinologists. It's surprising how many requests and how many people we assist with endocrinology, for example. Mm-hmm. And they're almost always our regional clients who work for embassies or NGOs in the region and have been referred to us, and they come to us. They're going to come to us and ask for go to SubmittiWed and want to see an endocrinologist, and we know who to take them to. If you walk into any hospital in Thailand, if it's a government hospital, you might have a very competent GP, but they're not used to dealing with international patients, and their English may not be super duper.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the big distinction in care, is kind of where you go, but very specifically who the doctor is.
I didn't just pick endocrinology out of a hat. My wife has a thyroid condition, which many people do, and has seen an endocrinologist for years. And here's the crazy thing. In Phoenix, Arizona, I think there's 2.
Wow.
And it's a 6-week waiting list to get in.
Wow.
Yet here, when she knew she needed a refill on her Armour thyroid, or whatever the equivalent here in town is, she went to Bumrungrad Hospital and went to the website and found the doctor that she wanted. The one that was, she didn't use your services, but she's cogent enough to go through and say, I want the one who actually spent some time in residency somewhere other than Thailand, preferably America, England, UK, whatever, and found 2 potential doctors. And so she called the hospital and said, I would like to make an appointment with either this doctor or this doctor as soon as possible. And they said, can you be here at 2? And there was 18, I'm not exaggerating, there were 18 endocrinologists on staff at Bumrungrad, or at least there was at that time. And they're able to see her immediately. Why can't we do that in America?
Well, that's a question for our politicians and our voters. I'm not getting into that.
Yeah, probably not fair. So why does it work so efficiently here? Let's forget what it's like. Why are this medical stuff, high-end private hospitals, why does it seem so efficient?
I mean, it's in those cases, it's built for service, but it's tough to word what I want to say, but they're very medically serious, and at the same time, it's built for to serve whoever comes in. And actually, if you went to MD Anderson in Houston, you'd see a similar concept, which is we do 360-degree care. If you want to see I think it's oncological psychiatrist. If you want to do anything, you want to see an endocrinologist, we have it all there. And they have that same philosophy here. So they invest a lot in facilities, they invest a lot in personnel. And when you walk in the door, you're never going to be left 24 hours a day at a place like Bangkok Hospital or Bumrungrad or SubmittiWed Sukhumvit. They're going to have a neurologist on staff. They're going to have a cardiologist on staff at minimum to make sure that things are taken care of. And you mentioned international quality. One of the things that's been interesting since I got into this is, my mother worked in the Texas Medical Center at Texas Children's Hospital on JCI accreditation and outcomes, and she has friends from there that were Thai that were teaching in America at some of the hospitals, and we've seen CVs of some of the people we work with who are medical oncologists who just got back from lecturing in America at MD Anderson to American people. So Thailand is not just learning healthcare and bringing it back here; they're originating healthcare. It's very interesting.
That's amazing, because we don't think about the country doing that at all, and that's wonderful that the kingdom is making that kind of outreach and inroads, if you will, to do that. You mentioned that these hospitals will have all of these specialists on staff, just in case, right? They're well staffed in case the situation comes in, they can staff it. That is so uniquely Thai. That's like when you go to Robinson's, you're in no shortage of someone helping you, or even a 7-Eleven. They're overstaffed in all these places. You're saying they tend to, at least from our position, overstaff in the medical fields as well.
Yeah, I think their thought process is more, you know what, we are a 24/7, 365. Just to give you some perspective on Bangkok Hospital. So Bangkok Hospital is owned by Bangkok Hospital Group, which is owned by Bangkok Dusit Medical Services, which is the 3rd largest hospital group in the world and the largest in Asia. It is the flagship hospital of basically the largest hospital group in this side of the world. And they take it as a point of pride that if you walk in there, they're gonna be able to take care of you. They're not at the point yet we're at for different reasons where they're thinking, okay, let's cut costs.
Yeah, to me, it feels like it's kind of a new concept rolling through American business right now, although rolling through is the wrong way. It's slowly being introduced, and, instead of running lean, it's running fat.
Yeah.
Like the military runs fat. We're really good at that.
Yep.
We overstaff in those areas. It sounds like they're taking a similar approach here of that idea of running fat so that when you need service, when you go to that hospital, you're going to get it immediately, so you don't even think about the next time you need something. Why not go back to that place that handled that weird off-the-wall thing that one time? I'll just go back here because I need someone to look at this pimple on my butt,
Yep, that's true.
Yeah. What is one thing, or if there is one thing, and the no is an okay answer here, that Bangkok medical systems don't do well? Is there a reason you should go out of the country for a certain procedure, certain idea, certain anything, or is it all covered here?
First of all, as someone who does not have a medical degree on my wall, I have to be careful what I say.
Right. I have one, but I printed it out before I came.
Let me go to Khao-San. I'll be right back. I don't have a solid answer to that, but I will say this. I'll give you a couple of interesting cases that come up where we run into a lot of no's. The reason Thailand works as a medical community is it's a country of 70 million people with about 7 major schools scattered throughout the country, the primary 3 of which are Chulo, Rama, and Siradad here in Bangkok. Now, those are fed, and so are the other central hospitals like Ratchathewi and whatnot, by all the cases that come in from all over the country that are interesting and complex and difficult. But, if you talk to people like oncologists in America and say, what, do they get colon cancer? Or I think it's colon like the way we do.
Yeah.
They say, no, they get stomach.
Oh.
So different, there are plenty of surgeons in Thailand, for example, who can perform a plastic surgery buttock implant. But
there you go.
It's so uncommon here that Mentor stopped stocking the implants at the warehouse, and they have to order them for 7 days. Or at the same time, you run into many hospitals that can't do gastric weight loss surgeries because guess what? Obesity wasn't a big deal here until recently.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I don't want to say they're not good at it. It's just one of those things where it's less common to find.
Because the population has different afflictions because of, we're different populations. I mean, they're quickly becoming more and more like us all the time.
Yeah.
Aren't they? Yeah.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. And here is where the audio dropped. Yeah, that happens when you're recording on the road. I was asking Kevin about diagnoses that I hadn't heard of, specifically something called a blood infection. We'll pick it up from there. And that means sepsis to me. I mean, when you have a blood infection, that means you've got an infection inside your blood system, and that means that's not good. That's really, really bad. You need to be on IV, and you need to be on dialysis machine and everything else that goes on it. Does it mean something else here? Because a friend of mine was actually diagnosed with a blood infection, a traveler coming through, and he was in, I don't know, somewhere in Krabi or somewhere else, and acting like a fool, and was hospitalized, and the diagnosis was blood infection, and 3 days of antibiotics, and they let him get on a plane and travel. Where in America, the concept of a blood infection would be, oh my God, put this person in ICU and wrap a tent around them. But again, I know you're not a medical doctor, but weird diagnoses like that. I mean, are there differences between diagnoses here and diagnoses what we're used to?
That's an interesting question. I can't answer at the non-international level. I mean, I've been to hospitals. I use my Social Security hospital, and that's an experience that's a bit different.
Yeah.
But at the major hospitals, it corresponds to what we would think of as Western medicine, but how I would say it is more common, as you know, to get a bag of pills here.
Oh, yeah.
And we're actually just dealing with, it's not a client of ours. Someone just reached out for help, and we realized that there was a communication gap between the hospital and the family, so we reached in, and the guy had gone to the airport, tried to get on the plane. They wouldn't let him on. And I can't get into the specifics of the situation, but he had some sort of systemic infection.
Oh.
Or they thought it was gout. They don't know what. But anyway, the point is, it does come out to be that, but at these level of facilities, the pathology is so good that they're going to test exactly like they would at a major facility in America, and you're going to get an exact diagnosis. It won't just be, there's something wrong with your blood. Here's some pills.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's everything I've experienced previously should say that's typically the way it's going to be. You're going to get a professional doctor, professional diagnosis, and great treatment. You just might get extra medicine.
Yeah.
At least a lot more medicine than you likely would get in your other country. And that's just thinking America. I spent some time in the European health system. They hate giving medicine in Europe.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
Did you go to Norway?
Yeah. No, I was just in the UK, and I was like, ugh. I don't know. I think maybe you should just go buy some Tylenol or some paracetamol at the drugstore, and you'll be fine. Like, wait, no, wait, I've got a serious problem. So it takes some work to get them to give you drugs. Not so much here.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Anything interesting and unique about medical tourism in Thailand that people need to know about? Like, be careful, don't forget these things, or should they just simply show up and find a doctor and hope for the best?
Yeah, no, this is a good question. You said your audience is made up of people who are, let's say, long-termers or thinking about it, right?
Right.
Yeah. First of all, get insurance, and one thing you need to know is all the major hospital groups are going to offer. I mean, I think Bangkok Hospital Group and Samedi would have like 1,200 insurance contracts per facility.
Oh, wow.
It's astounding. So when people ask us sometimes, what insurance should I get? Like any, whichever one you want. I don't know. But second thing, there's some interesting quirks that are not going to be obvious to you as a foreigner, and some of them are not related to Thailand, some of them are. First one that is this. If you're a cash payer and your bill starts to get really high and a lot of it consists of room and medication, and I'm saying this is stuff you can find publicly online. You'll notice if you sign up for Bangkok Airways flyer bonus, usually once a year they'll have some special discount at one of the Bangkok hospital groups because the guy who owns BDMS that owns all the hospitals owns that airline.
Of course.
Yeah. So you'll see on there 20% off medication, 10% off this, 10% off room. You are expected at a certain level to ask for a discount over a certain price, but they're not just going to offer it. And if you think about it, it works the same way in America. You can negotiate your bill if it gets high.
Right.
So one of the things foreigners always think is that sounds scammy, and I say, hey, well, if America's scammy, which we can argue it is,
let's not, I'm not going to belabor that point. Right.
Then this is scammy. But I don't think it is. It's just a volume discount like anyone would get, and it's on things the hospital already owns, so the margin is baked in.
You're definitely not putting anybody out. You're not going overboard if you ask for a discount when you're faced with something that's a serious thing. If you go in for a 2,000 baht bill, that's probably you're not impressing anybody. Go ahead and cough up the money for that.
Yeah, if it's a package procedure, which a lot of things increasingly are, and that's what our technology works on, they're not going to want to drop you a big discount because everything is baked into that package cost.
Right.
And if there's a lot of doctor's time and nurses' time involved, they're not. But when it's things that they already own, the margin is already figured into the process, and they're much more likely to say, okay, you just spent 300,000 baht out of pocket. This is not insurance, out of pocket.
Right.
Yeah, then we'll be willing to cut you some level of discount.
Sure, yeah. Which, for the people who don't know Thai numbers, you just said 300,000 and their heads are spinning, right? But I'm just going to let your head spin with that as we finish the conversation. Kevin, thank you very much for coming on and chatting with me about this today.
Thank you, Evo. Been good to meet you.
Really interesting hearing from a guy who works on the inside there. Like you said, neither of us are experts, and but we've both been in the hospital and used the medical system for various reasons. But actually, probably a little bit too much information here. But both of my parents had cancer last year. They're both okay now, but at the time it was sort of touch and go for a while about whether they should just come to Bangkok.
Wow.
To get treatment. And they're Canadian, and the thing about Canada is that everyone always says Canada is like this rainbow unicorn happy fun land of free healthcare. It's not quite that simple. It's not 100% free all the time for everything. There are things that are expensive, and they in the end they stayed in Canada and got treatment, very good treatment, but it was touch and go for a while, and we almost sort of decided for them to come here and get treated because the hospitals here are as good as anything you'd find in Canada. So
I'm happy to say that your parents are okay, luckily, although it would have been nice to see them, I'm sure, but nonetheless you want them to be healthy and hale, which is a very important thing too.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, off of the downer topic, thanks for that, Greg. And on to the great topic, everyone's favorite segment, Love, Loathe, or Leave, where one of us, this time it's your turn, springs on the other one, something that, to find out whether it's a little quirky thing about Bangkok, does that person love it, do they loathe it, or do they hate it so much, makes them want to leave the country forever. And it's your turn this week. What do you have for me?
Well, this week we get a suggestion from one of our listeners, a guy on Twitter named Thailand Zone, who has suggested a few things in the past to us. How you doing there, buddy? And he gave us a little bit of a scenario that we've all encountered. You're out at a street food restaurant on the corner of the whatever. You're chowing down. You got a little grease on your chin, a little whatever.
Yeah.
You need to clean up. You reach for the tissue, and you pull up this 3-molecule thick 3 centimeter square
Yeah.
tissue, and I use the word tissue in quotes because it's barely a tissue. What is up with these tiny little, usually pink tissues that they give you to mop up the disgusting mess that usually results from street food?
It's really much more like gossamer threads of some silkworm.
It's like a suggestion of fabric. Like this, there's almost something here.
Yeah, it's like it was something that was used to wrap a mummy 40,000 years ago, but now most, as you said, of the material is gone, and if you just blow on it the wrong way, it will completely disintegrate. That is what you want me to wipe my greasy paws with, Thailand? Are you kidding me?
After I just finished ripping apart half a chicken that was doused in oil and roasted on who knows what over an open flame.
It's puzzling. I don't understand it. And when I was back in America for those 3 weeks recently, it's one of the things that I loved is I could count at napkins, either cloth or I don't care if they were paper based, but at least they were substantial. You know, they were not going to leave more residue on my hand than they took off. I clearly loathe them, but you know, I also don't feel kind of bad when I completely go through an entire container full of the tissues because that's what it takes. It can't be saving you money, people.
Yeah. I got to say, it's funny how much you miss being able to grab a square meter of fabric and just bury your face in rub around and clean yourself up. That's a really nice feeling, and it's weird how you miss that. So I loathe these things too, and like you said, I end up going through about 50 or 60 handfuls of these things in the course of a good meal. But I do remember reading a very, very good book called Very Thai that is a must read for anyone who's coming through Thailand or who's staying here. Great book, and it just goes into detail about these little quirks that you'll find, and one of them is these tiny little thin napkins. And the reasoning behind it that was suggested was that for a Thai person, once you have used something to wipe your mouth and hands, it's dirty. Why would you want to use it again? Which kind of makes sense. So if I grab this square meter of fabric and rub my face in it, you could make a pretty good argument that it's filthy. Why would I want to rub my face in it again, you know? So their reasoning was like, well, it's like once you clean your mouth and your hands, that's garbage, which I can kind of see that.
I don't think I can argue that point anymore. Crap. Great. Okay. I guess I have to switch my answer to love. I get it. Thank you, Thailand.
I love these tiny little napkins. Well, everyone, thanks for listening to the Bangkok podcast this week. If you have anything you'd like to share or a topic you'd like to hear us talk about on a future show, just head over to bangkokpodcast.com and leave a comment, or you can reach out directly to me on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg.
Or you can find us or send us, that's what I'm looking for, send us a message on Facebook or on Twitter at Simply Bangkok Podcast. I'm Evo Terra, and Greg and I will be back here next week with more stories of our lives lived in Krung Thep Mahanakan right here on the Bangkok Podcast. Cheers!
I didn't want to tell a story about how I usually have sweat dripping off my nose too.
Yeah, right. When you wipe your head, it comes big, you leave a little white little clitty litter all over your head. So yeah, you don't talk about that.
Yeah. Well, at least you have hair. When you have stubble, you leave like little shreds of tissue all over your head. It's a disgusting mess.
Yeah, that would not be a good thing.